All right, Facebook friends. This is my first Facebook Live that I'm doing with my friends. So this is not my business page. This is my friends and family that are connected to me. And I'm here with a very special guest, one of my mentors. And I'm here because I think it's really important for you guys who are my friends and family to understand what I do for a living and what I've spent the last 3 years of my life studying. And Dr. Ettinger, who I'm going to introduce to you, was one of my first mentors who's really opened my eyes to looking at things in a very, very interesting way related to health. And also, right now we're in the middle of a lot of debate and division amongst our world. I've my own friends related to the coronavirus, which is almost like a taboo word. I don't even want to say it anymore, COVID, and the death numbers and the treatments. And should we lock down? Should we not lock down? Should we be isolated? Should we not? Should we open up the state? Should we not? It's just a lot of debate. And there's a lot of wild opinions out there. I'm sure you can agree with me. And they don't always follow the science. And so we follow science because we're evidence-based. So I want to talk about, the science and what is the science telling us here. And really, I'm not here to talk about anything negative. I want to talk about our immune system, really, because that's what we're born with. That's what protects us from the pathogens like the viruses. And they're involved in our defenses, and including COVID. As myself, as a clinical nutritionist, my job is to be a health investigator to identify your root cause of your disease. And, through lab testing like blood work, we can find out where your imbalances are. And then we can work through lifestyle changes, which we know are 70% of the equation. 70% is lifestyle, 30% is genetics in the pie of disease pathogenesis. And so lots of things, you guys know me, I'm all about detoxification, toxins, your diet, your exercise, your lifestyle. Dr. Ettinger has introduced me to some more different philosophies on sunlight exposure. So I want to introduce you to my amazing mentor here, who has been in the field for over 30 years. I'm new to this field, so I rely on people like him who've got the experience. He is in California, and he is the founder at Advanced Healing Center. 32 years of clinical practice. He's treated over 25,000 patients, and he's mainly been focused on GI, mitochondria, autoimmunity, and also small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And I'm sure a whole lot more things now since I wrote that bio for him. His motto is both health and disease are easy to achieve, which I think is true, although we try to make it complicated. So let me introduce you to Dr. Ettinger here, and I'll go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, Mandy, for allowing me to speak with all your Facebook friends. In a nutshell, it's been 31 years. I mean, you're super close. 31 years in practice, and to tell you about myself is I practice what I preach. So basically, everything I do in my life is what I educate my patients on. So for instance, our body remodels according to the stress placed upon it. So that is one of my underlying datums. So however you want to be in your life, you need to do those things. If you want to run fast, run fast. If you want to jump high, jump high. If you want to stay young, think young, act young, do the things you would do when you were young. So I'm just the composite of that datum. That's basically me. I still catch waves. I'm going to be going to the beach in just a minute, catching waves when we're done cross country running with my 15-year-old daughter. I focus on a lot of research in every ology there is, because the more data I have, the better I could help myself, and the better I could help myself, the better I could help my family and my patients. And so today we're just going to get into a lot of that, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. And I've got a bunch of things I want to talk to you about. I completely am on board with you on the longevity and just staying young. And a lot of times I sometimes I still feel like I'm 25, which is, I guess that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Although when I was 25, I felt like I was 50. So I want people to understand that you can reverse the things no matter where you are in your life. because I always like to say that, and this I always tell my people that talk to me about like, am I ever going to get better? And I say, well, let me ask you a really important question. When you cut your finger, does it heal? And they say, yes, it heals. I go, well, then what makes you believe that you're not going to heal from the condition that you have? If your finger is healing, you're still alive, your cells are still functioning. You just have to uncover the reason for the dysfunction. And once you start to regain function, your body starts to heal. And that's exactly what's happened to me. I mean, you know, when you met me, I was in dire pain with interstitial cystitis. It was horrible. I was near suicide. I was, I didn't know what was going on with my body. And then I took this journey to start to educate myself through the doctorate. And I'm now in remission. I'm full remission. I have no more pain. I don't have any issues with urinary tract infections. And I don't have any issues with the bladder pain. But really, it's taken years. It's taken a few years. So it wasn't something that I could do overnight. And also just trial and error with my own body, right? Like what works for me isn't going to work for you, isn't going to work for the person next door. It's really individualized. I truly believe that. But there are some basic philosophies. So one of the basic philosophies that you've brought to the table is the role of sunlight, which is, it's outside, it's nature, right? We're supposed to be out there, aren't we? And we're not, because people go from their home to their job in the garage, and then they come right back home in their job and they haven't gotten an hour or even 5 minutes of sunlight. Is that correct?
Correct. 97% of all human, let's say 97% of Americans, the majority of Americans spend about 97% of their day indoors. So yes. If you want to talk about that for a second, I'll give you my quick coronavirus spiel on vitamin D in the sun.
Yes, vitamin D in the sun. And so talk about, just generally what its role is. And then if somebody, what are diagnostic ways that people can identify that they are at risk, and whether, that's a vitamin D deficiency, because that's another thing. I think people go run and they do these labs and they do the 25OH and they're like, oh, I have a deficiency, where I'm like, no, that's not necessarily, that's only one marker of vitamin D. There's two. You can also do the stored and the free form. So yeah, go ahead and talk about, just generally what the role of vitamin D does. And then if someone wants to figure out if they're deficient, what they should do.
Yeah, the testing, it's still the 125OH is still a good marker for D status, a good surrogate marker for D status. And we want that to be minimally, at least 40, minimally, but really 70 to 90 would be fantastic. And just really fast on this, vitamin D, now this is my own research and there is data to support this. Vitamin D supplementation does not work physiologically to the same degree the sun, the vitamin D we synthesize from the sun. So vitamin D orally works great on calcium metabolism, but vitamin D from the sun works on everything else. And that's really the D that we need. So how this applies now to our immune system is, I always look at logic and analytical thought. So if we go back to whether a person believes in evolution or creation, we are who we are today and the world is how it is today. So in the beginning, we lived naked under the sun and the moon 24/7, 365. And we were created alongside of bacterias, yeasts, and funguses. 8 to 10% of our genome is virus. We have evolved with virus. We have evolved with bacteria. Our mitochondria is basically our body, the eukaryotic cells swallowing up bacteria, and that bacteria became the mitochondria. So basically, we are bacteria, we are virus, we have fungus in us. So and then the body evolved under all the different wavelengths of light. So how this is relating now to the coronavirus is something really simple. So we have ultraviolet light, 312 nanometers of ultraviolet B light, mixes with, I'm going to just make it simple. Ultraviolet light mixes with a type of cholesterol. It synthesizes in our skin as vitamin D. Our body has something called an innate immune system, an immune system that was created from the beginning of time, that we are born with, that is just part of who we are. We have this thing called antimicrobial peptides, and a specific one called cathelicidin antimicrobial peptide, CAMP. And just if somebody wants to do research, it is LL37, the human cathelicidin antimicrobial peptide. Well, what it does is, picture it's just as little bullets. And these little bullets, in response to primarily bacteria, but also virus and fungi, basically just neutralize them. So it just neutralizes virus, fungus, and bacteria. And the most pathogenic bacteria is called gram-negative bacteria. Mm-hmm. So most bacteria have one cell wall. Gram-negative bacteria have an outer and an inner membrane. The inner membrane is this really funky chemical called lipopolysaccharide. And in research, in laboratory setting, if they ever want to induce an inflammatory response to try to study a drug or the mechanism of inflammation, they always just inject pure LPS into a lab rat or a mouse. Well, the CAMP grabs onto the LPS and neutralizes it. So over millions of years, or hundreds of thousands, or tens of thousands of years, our body created this CAMP in order to, in response to virus, bacteria, and fungi, to basically neutralize it. And the level of CAMP inside of our body is in direct proportion to the level of vitamin D. Ooh. So now we then look at people who are dying of coronavirus. So the head of the Centers of Disease Control, I forget her name. She was, I think it was 2002 to 2009. She did a little op-ed piece, and she said 50% of everybody who is dying of coronavirus now in hospitals is dying of secondary bacterial infection, and it's a gram-negative streptococcal pneumoniae. So these people are creating a ton of this LPS, super inflammatory, on top of the inflammation that's induced by the virus. The body cannot handle it. Most of these people are low vitamin D status because they're either in assisted living facility. 81% of the majority of everyone who died in Sweden is aged 81, which is the actual life expectancy of the people in Sweden. The average life expectancy is 81. The average age of people dying in Sweden is 81. Italy was 78. So they're indoors, low vitamin D status. They have no innate immune system. And so now if they get anything, the influenza, corona, whatever it may be, there's no innate immune system to even initiate a response, they die.
Yeah.
So then we reverse engineer it. So so it's not D, it's not innate immune system. It's basically those who get the most amount of sun exposure have the least incidence of death of all cause mortality. So there's studies that show people with the most amount of sun live longer without disease than those with the least amount of sun exposure, because basically it modulates the microbiome, it facilitates a healthy innate immune response, it does a ton of different things. So the key is to think, how did the original man and woman live tens of thousands of years ago? What did they eat? How did they move? How did they live their life outdoors? We don't do those same things today. We don't move like they did, run for their food, harvest their food, walk miles for their food outdoors. And the quality of food they ate was different than we have today. So the modern life is creating the
susceptibility, really.
Yeah. We're basically creating an environment that is more pro-disease than it is pro-health.
Right. And we see that a lot with the rise of autoimmunity and cancer anyway. So that's really interesting. So I remember you were talking a while ago about how there was years ago, their clinics, this clinic in another country was outdoors. What was that? Can you explain that? The outdoor clinic?
The Auguste Rollier.
Yeah.
He just realized that now we didn't have the laboratory settings like we have today. This was just empirical data. He just saw that the people with the most amount of sun healed. And so it was for lupus vulgaris, which was a type of tuberculosis, and it would affect the lungs or affect the skin primarily. But he found that the vitamin D that was synthesized on their tissues from the sun was basically healing up this condition. And so he built hospitals with southeast facing balconies, and he rolled everybody out on gurneys, and they would spend a period of time out in the sun every day. And then he created his own amplification devices for specific lesions that he would focus the sun just on these lesions to heal up the deep wounds on their tissues. And then and this was after the Spanish flu epidemic, and found that the people that were outside in the cots fared far better than the people inside of hospitals. So all this data just basically empirically shows that the people with the most amount of sun do far better than the people with the least amount of sun. And it's that trickle down between the sun to the D to the innate immune system, and then modulating the microbiome. So there's a skin-gut axis, and the skin-gut axis works either one of two ways. You destroy it under high dose blue light, or you activate it under full spectrum sunlight.
Interesting. So hold on one second. I'm going to close the door.
Sure.
So now for us, I can see now you're motivating me to go and create a workspace outside and like roll my desk out there for a couple hours. And I could do that now. It's beautiful outside, sunny days. But there's people who just can't. Like, if you think about the corporate life, right? They're really seriously like inside all day. The only time that they get to themselves is lunchtime. And sometimes they don't even get a lunch break. They're doing a working lunch. So what do you recommend for, working people who are in that situation?
Okay. So there's two parts to that question. So we'll do, I'm a little bit of a hard ass. If my wife were here right now, she would say the same thing. I'm a little harsh.
Okay.
So it's the first thing defers back to, I was named after Marcus Aurelius, the last great Stoic Roman emperor, and this book, the Daily Stoic. So one of his mentors who he studied was Epictetus, and Epictetus said there's only one thing in the universe that you have absolute control over, and that is choice. So the people who have that lifestyle, that is their choice. Okay. If somebody says, but you don't understand, I can't do that. No, that is your choice. If you choose that lifestyle, that is your choice. Now let's say that's already locked in stone. You've made that choice. You're working in an office tower in New York, living in a high floor condo apartment building in New York, and you're not getting any sun. Then you spend $490 on a Sperti, SPERTI vitamin D lamp, and you spend 5 minutes front and back there every day at 15 inches, and you boost your vitamin D level up that way. So there is a way to do it. I would do that over the sun. And then there's their Fiji lamp, that's the combo UVA UVB lamp.
I got the lamp.
Yeah,
I got the lamp.
I have the vitamin D lamp here as well. So during the winter time, I'm getting my lamp, and then during the summertime, I'm getting the sun. But I don't take any vitamin D supplementation.
Great. Yeah, me too. I'm definitely, I should get my levels checked. I haven't gotten them checked in a while, but I definitely got the lamp. So there you go. You got that?
Yeah.
So if you're one of those people and you've made the choice, then you can make an investment for your health. It's an investment for life, and it doesn't take long. And don't tell me you don't have 5 minutes to stand in front of a lamp. Please don't.
Correct.
I'm a hard ass too. I'm gonna be honest with you. I am. I try to hold it back because I can tell not everyone jives with it. But, I'm glad to hear that you are too, because I am in the same camp as being hard. So let's move on to the next one. So that's, you guys heard that. And he mentioned the microbiome. So let's talk about that one. And I want to read something to you guys. I've said this before in a lot of my other talks, and I just really resonates with me. I got it from a journal in 2014. And here's what it says. All right, listen closely. The basal tuning of the immune system, which priming, like making it function better, is associated with constant sensing of the microbial products or ligands, implies that subtle changes in this conditioning may have long-term consequences on the capacity of the host to mount a systemic immune response and develop inflammatory disease. So understand the microbial connection here. The mechanism underlying this phenomenon remains incompletely understood, but we could speculate, and we're understanding it more. This was 6 years ago when this was written, so I'm sure we have a lot more understanding of the microbiome. Commensal bacteria-derived signals can influence gene expression profiles of immune cells, epigenetic signaling of your immune cells via epigenetic modifications, and I'll explain to those listening what epigenetic means. You can too, of genes involved in innate responses, thus creating a transcriptional state that enables basal expression of host defense factors and rapid responses upon encounter with the pathogen. So basically what this is saying is that our microbiome is involved in our immune responses epigenetically and how we respond to pathogens. And now we're in this situation where there's a new guy in town, right? Like the common cold, we've always been, we may have been developed, adaptive immunity to that for years and years and years, but now there's a new guy in town, and the new guy is COVID. And so those who have dysbiosis, I believe, from what I'm reading, and you can elaborate, are downregulated in their immune response because of this basal tuning of the immune system with our microbiome. Epigenetic means above the genome. So your genes are interacting with our environment, and that's why it's called epi, above genome. So our genes interact with our environment, which is why I said 70% of our health and our health disposition is environmental. Correct?
Basically.
Yes.
But it's then even, so it's one of my favorite books, Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief. So the epigenetics, briefly, I mean, the primary five, even though there's thousands of epigenetic influences or millions, how we sleep or don't sleep, how we exercise or don't exercise, how we eat or don't eat, interference on the nervous system, so like concussion, scoliosis, osteoarthritis, forceps birth, anything that's going to put a stress on the nervous system, and then thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. So each one of those things can upregulate, turn on, or downregulate, turn off a good or bad gene. But the biggest one is the thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, because if I had $5,000 a week to go to Whole Foods and buy the greatest supplements on the planet, the greatest food on the planet, I was working out regularly, I was going to the chiropractor, massage therapist, and acupuncturist, I'm sleeping like a baby, but every time I go to work, my boss is telling me I'm a dirty, rotten son of a gun, and telling me the job I'm doing is I'm a failure, and I'm going to fire you tomorrow, and there's a threat of being fired every day. Well, all of that won't make up for the mental stress. Each one of those things can, each one of these epigenetic factors can affect the diversity and abundance of the bacteria that make up our microbiome. But one thing that I'm not even going to get into this topic, but one thing that people have never even heard is a thing called a virome. And we have actually more virus in our gut than we'll ever have bacteria in our gut. So the viruses and the bacteria are actually playing together. And that's, like I said, 8 to 10% of our genome is virus. So right now, the thing that is affecting people is the stress of the coronavirus,
of course,
affecting their microbiome, the lack of the sun, because you have that skin gut axis affecting the microbiome, people possibly not having an abundance of polyphenols, so all the colored pigments in foods, the purples and reds and oranges and things like that, that help create a better classes of bacteria and more diversity of bacteria. So there's a ton of things affecting the basal tuning of the immune system via the microbiome. And a test that people could do, is not the cheapest test in the world, but if they measure what's called their secretory IgA in a stool analysis,
Yeah.
and if it's too high, then you have pathogenic bacteria and inflammation in the gut, like ulcerative colitis or severe dysbiosis. And if you have too low secretory IgA, then you don't have another part of your innate immune system, because the biggest part of our immune system is in our gut. So if your stool secretory IgA is low, so you have your salivary IgA, which is first part of our immune system, second part are in the gut would be the secretory, then you're doomed. I mean, then you're basically susceptible to autoimmune and all kinds of infections.
You know, I love SIGA. That's like my new thing I've been researching. Actually, my doctorate final project, it was with microbiome labs that does the megaspore.
Right.
So we're actually, once we're lifted from this situation, we're going to move forward with the study with microbiome labs, and we're actually going to be looking at chronic UTIs and looking at secretory IgA as well as vaginal microbiome, which is our first entry into the UTI world. With
Sure.
There's not a lot of studies on this. What I found very upsetting was when I was looking for studies on secretory IgA, especially urinary secretory IgA, there's not a lot of studies. The studies were back in the 80s. It's almost like they stopped looking. And there are studies on secretory IgA for the gut, and there are salivary secretory IgAs. But here's something really interesting. I think a lot of people don't realize that actually a lot of the defense also starts in your mouth. And if your secretory IgA is downregulated in your mouth, the pathogens that we're exposed to, and I mean, I don't want to say they're all pathogens, there's also good guys too, but that starts in the mouth, and the digestion starts in the mouth. And then if that's downregulated, then you're going to have more problems through the GI because it's allowed entry in. So some of these studies were actually saying that the mouth, and Kieran was talking about this too, Kieran Krishnan on a lot of his talks, that there's a mouth-gut axis. Correct. Where the mouth, a lot of dysbiosis actually originates from our mouth.
Correct.
So, and that's the overuse of mouthwash is actually linked to
the overuse. I mean, every time we bring up one thing, it could lead to an entire talk. So mouthwash destroys the bacteria in the mouth, which then those bacteria are nitrate forming bacteria, which then you don't have the wrong ingredient to make nitric oxide, which was one of your questions.
Yep. So
you can actually become nitric oxide deficient just by which is a peripheral vasodilator and a signaling molecule for many different reactions in the body. But just by using mouthwash, you can inhibit that.
Because you're killing the bacteria in the crypts of your mouth that are metabolizing. I guess there's an enzymatic reaction with them with nitric oxide synthase. And so if we don't have that process happening, then we actually systemically are going to promote low nitric oxide, which seems to be isn't that one of the top causes of hypertension? One of them?
Indirectly, but here's the neat thing about this talk. Everything goes back to the sun. How do we make our nitric oxide? Ultraviolet A hitting our skin, working with called opsin receptors, and these opsin receptors with nitric oxide synthase is then creating nitric oxide within the capillaries of our tissues, creating vasodilation, which then lowers the blood pressure. So everything, if you backtrace it, goes to some of the ultraviolet light, A or B, near or far infrared, or a color of visible light. So every reaction of our body, everything that ever occurs in our body, it's like human photosynthesis. All the metals in our body, the magnesium and the iron, pick up specific wavelengths of light. So we're operated via light. The gut microbiome produces light. It produces heat, which is far infrared light. So our gut microbiome is producing light.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. The what was I going for here? But anyway, I lost my train of thought. But every reaction of the body, it's called the aromatic amino acids that are the tyrosine, phenylalanine, histidine. So how do we make thyroid hormone and our neurotransmitters? We have the light going through our eye. Mm-hmm. It basically pick the photon traps, which are these aromatic amino acids called benzene rings, grab onto wavelengths of light, and then we initiate the neurotransmitters that help our mood. So seasonal affective disorder is nothing more than you have tyrosine, which you can't make dopamine and serotonin without, not being able to grab onto light, so you're not making the hormones and you feel like crap. When the photons are able to be grabbed on by those amino acids and you make those neurotransmitters, you feel amazing. And
then on top of it, downregulated gut microbiome because of the lack of the sunlight. And then you've got, digestive imbalances as a result of that. So you're not metabolizing the tryptophan appropriately to make that serotonin as well. Right. And then there's inflammation, which is a whole nother thing. But, I love that. And, the one thing I was wondering, you're talking about the sun was, so really, I mean, it almost sounds like it's a very simple solution.
Basically, get outside. Live your life according to nature rather than living your life according to man. We have moved from nature to technology because we are fed commercials by the people who want us to buy things that technology is good. And yes, some technology is great. I mean, I love having a washing machine rather than washing your clothes by hand. But we have adopted that everything needs to be a technological, with halogens and LEDs and living indoors and phones and this and that. And we've moved further and further and further away from nature, and we're living a lesser quality of life the further we move away from nature, and getting more and more and more disease. We have more gyms, better access to organic and amazing food gurus, hundreds and hundreds of blogs and food gurus and podcasts and books and education on and supplementation and vitamin shops on every corner. But the quality of people's lives are diminishing. With access to all of that stuff, the quality of our lives are still diminishing. So it just shows us it's not a supplement, a food, an exercise game. It's not how much of that stuff we do or how amazing amount of supplements and food we get. It's what are the people not telling you, because they're trying to sell a product. Going out into nature and walking into a forest is free. Going to the beach and laying out at the beach and catching waves is free. Paddleboarding is free. And so if I just said and wrote a book, it'd be a one paragraph book. Go outside and into the sun, into the book, and I'd have to sell it for, 50 cents. But it's worth tens of thousands of dollars rather than selling the South Beach diet for $15, which doesn't do anything for anybody except make him very wealthy.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So, I think we have made it very complicated. I think that I remember a long time ago, my another mentor I had at the gym, his name was Mark Anderson. I know he's not on here listening, but he told me it's really basic. It's really simple. And for him, it was movements. Movements was his thing because he was a trainer. And so, I mean, he ate well too, but he was the bodybuilder type, right? So they ate the bodybuilder, but his big thing was movement. So can you talk about that and where we're going wrong in movements, like basic movements? Because I know when I first met you, you told me that you thought that an ideal heart rate for somebody exercising should be 180 minus their age. Remember that?
That would be zone 2 training. Yeah. To stay in that aerobic zone.
I never forgot that because it always stuck with me because I was taught 220 minus your age, and then you do the 92, 85%, the whole mathematical calculation they teach us. But I always remember that. And so when I work out now, I always try to stay within 180 minus my age. And can you explain the movement philosophy and then why that's the number?
Yeah. Again, so let's have everybody remember this. So this is something I learned, graduated in 1989, so a long time ago. It's called Wolff's Law. And Wolff's Law, paraphrasing, Bone remodels according to the stress placed upon it. Okay, so bone, a pitcher's arm will be denser than his non-pitching arm. Okay, a power lifter's thighs, pelvis, and spine is going to be denser than somebody who's never power lifted before. Okay, as we get older and we move less, well, here's an easier one. If you live up in the International Space Station with no gravity, you're going to develop osteoporosis really fast because you don't need a skeletal system compared to living down on Earth with gravity. Now, that could be extrapolated out to every single process, mind, body, spirit. The body remodels according to the stress placed upon it or not placed upon it. So everything that has ever happened to you or not happened to you from the moment of conception to today is exactly who you are. Mind, body, spirit. So everything you've done or not done since that moment is you today. So the movement is, however, it goes back to our first few minutes doing this, however you want your body to be, you need to do that thing. If you want to be a sloth, act like a sloth. If you want to run, fast, run fast. So we need to keep any motion on our body. Our body was designed to run. What was the first thing that we did 50,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago? We ran. Our body was designed. It's a perfectly running machine, barefoot, but we don't do that. And we don't do that on Earth. We wear insulated shoes, which affect the way that we move. And then we don't actually even move. So if a person would do anything is better than nothing. But if they want to keep their body youthful, they have to keep the joints lubricated, the ligaments, tendons, and connective tissue, because the density of the ligaments, tendons, and connective tissue are in direct proportion to how much stress you are going to place upon them. And then that's in relationship to what quality of food you are eating. I mean, if you're eating things that aren't going to convert to collagen protein, you're not going to make collagen within our body. So a vegan diet, not bashing a vegan diet or vegans, but a vegan diet's not going to be high in collagen forming food. So over time, the ligaments and tendons and connective tissue is eventually going to fail.
I remember when I first met you, you had said that your sickest patients are vegans.
But an uneducated vegan.
Uneducated.
Right?
Yes. Most people aren't doing it right.
It's difficult to be a great vegan. You're gonna have to do super routine laboratory tests. You're gonna have to check everything out. You are gonna have to supplement. And so again, that goes back to if evolution or creation wanted us to not have B12 or to have B12 from a vegetable source, it would have built it into a vegetable source. If it wanted us to have heme iron and be a vegetarian or vegan, it would have created heme iron in a vegetable. It's not there. It's an animal protein. So just by sheer logic and analytical thought, that red meat source was created alongside a human as our multivitamin to get the proteins and the iron and the B12 for our body.
Right. You know, you're talking to you about that actually changed me, and I actually make sure I get the grass-fed beef now into my diet. I used to be avoiding red meat myself. So it was a very, and my body metabolizes meat really well. So that was a really great addition. So let's segue that into the discussion on energy, because we know that we need nutrients for energy, but, you know, I feel like we're definitely a world of overfed and undernourished by the SAD diet, which is standard American diet. And we see this as evidence. We can see this because if you could, just by blood work, you can see that some people are low in very many essential vitamins and minerals, going in order, you know, not necessarily order of greatest to least, but just the top ones: magnesium, B vitamins, iron. All these are involved in biochemical and enzymatic and physiological processes in the body for generating ATP, which is necessary for a lot of reasons. I mean, that's like the energy currency. It's like if your car didn't have gasoline, it wouldn't run. So I'd love for people to understand this important ATP, because we see so many people with chronic fatigue. And then you run like an organic acid test on them, you see they have mitochondrial dysfunction, right? With all their mitochondria on their Krebs cycle markers are elevated. So the role of ATP has in your cell, particularly let's think about immunity And those people who are chronically fatigued and have mitochondrial dysfunction, why and what can they do besides, I know with sunlight, of course, but what other
Right.
things they can do to improve that?
Okay. Complicated subject that we have to make super easy. Okay.
Sure.
So inside the cell, we have something called a mitochondria, and a mitochondria basically takes in energy that we've metabolized from food, fat or sugars, and then it makes this thing called ATP, our energy currency. We have a certain amount. So there's two ways we look at it. You could have a pool of 100%, and this is called the heteroplasmic rate. So theoretically, if it were linear, you would lose 10% per decade and you die at age 100, because you lose 10% at 100, you don't have any more mitochondria, so you can't produce any more energy and you just expire. So you have a certain amount that we lose every year, but we can create more mitochondrial efficiency and we can create more mitochondrial density. So our big muscle groups, thighs, buttocks, super big muscle groups have a ton of ATP in those muscles. So if we wanted to increase mitochondria as we age, we have to build up greater lean muscle mass to have more mitochondria to make up for what we're losing. But then the stuff we can't really replace is the highest mitochondrial density is central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, heart, and liver. So heart is a muscle, but it's hard to just, other than doing cardio to keep the heart muscle well, we're going to lose some there. You can't really actively control mitochondrial density in the liver. So we just, want to take care of our liver. And then our brain and central nervous system tends to be affected, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease tends to be, they call it now type 3 for Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes. So they're showing that high inflammation induced by high insulin and blood glucose is affecting that. But what is it doing? It's destroying the mitochondria. So we want to keep insulin levels down. So all disease pathways, they basically narrow down to two things. Disease and aging is basically insulinogenic or inflammation. So theoretically, if we could keep insulin levels down and inflammation levels down, we live our normal genetic potential. And then as far as keeping mitochondrial efficiency, we have to allow the mitochondria to work, which means that we need to exercise. We need to get some fuel in them and make them need to produce ATP. Because remember, the body remodels according to the stress placed upon it. You're going to increase efficiency and resiliency by making something work. It's better to work than not work. And then the foods that we need are high electron and hydrogen dense foods. So fish oil is a longer chain fatty acid, more bonds there, hydrogen bonds, than let's say olive oil. So you're going to get more ATP per molecule of fish oil than you would, let's say, made from olive oil. So having fish over another type of fat would be fantastic. And then we also need electron donors. So the electron donors could come from many sources, like CoQ10 in broccoli. That helps. It's actually part of the ATP synthesis comes from coenzyme Q10, and so you can eat broccoli or high energetic foods. So things grown in the sun is basically anything grown in the sun compared to, let's say, hydroponic indoor growing is actually fantastic, because you're basically taking sun to food and eating that, and we're basically getting electrons into our body from food. I like organ meat, so again, defer back to, I'm kind of going a little bit all over, but going back to, well, what did the first humans 50,000 years ago living in East Africa, the abundance of oyster, and you could look at the archaeological digs and show that, 16-foot walls of oyster shells. So obviously oysters had to have been super abundant, and they could probably just walk down and scoop them up. Oysters is on a hierarchy of foods. It's like nature's multivitamin, multi-mineral in this little shell. Then oyster, and then seafood, because our brain and central nervous system is just a giant ball of DHA. All our cell membranes, coating of the red blood cell, is DHA. It's one of the largest fatty chain molecules we could put into our body, so it yields the most amount of energy from a single molecule of that. And then organ meat would be the next. So we're looking at the B's, the iron, the copper, the zinc, the A, and the D. So back 50,000 years ago, they were eating everything. They were eating all the offal. They were eating the kidneys and the liver and probably the lungs and the brain and the heart, everything. And so that was their multivitamin, multi-mineral, was just eating the organ meats. And then the muscle meat would be the least. That would be the last thing. So you'd eat the organ meats first. You'd eat the muscle meat last. And so there's a clinic in Paleomedica in Dr. Clemens and then Dr. Toth in Hungary. And so they have a primal diet that is basically for their cancer and autoimmune patients, that is just a lot of offal, organ meats, and fat to generate just tons. So they're looking at the food, what foods can give them the most amount of nutrition and generate the highest levels of ATP and create the least amount of inflammation. So it's the most potent anti-inflammatory diet a human could eat, and the highest nutrient dense mitochondrial producing or ATP producing diet there is, by having basically fats, fatty meats, organ meats, and nothing that's going to have to be reactive. And they're getting brain cancer patients to have a stable remission, meaning it's not progressing or necessarily disappearing, but creating the stable remission where the tumor maintains its size, but never progresses in the people are living. So they have one guy they followed, I think, for a couple of years now, that is maintaining a stable remission of a glioblastoma, which is a deadly form of brain cancer, by following this diet. So we can maintain, hopefully, theoretically, even a disease progression and possibly disease reversal, just by modulating what we put into our body.
Organ meats. Oh,
I know. But again, I grew up in a traditional New York Jewish family where liver was just part of our diet from growing up. And now every generation is eating less and less and less. So then it's really an acquired taste if you're not brought up on it. Yeah. So eventually it'll probably be, but in Europe they're eating, so at that clinic, brain is, I've never eaten brain before, but brain is part of the diet, and spleen and thymus and kidney and heart, and those are all liver. Those are all normal foods for Eastern Europe, because they've just kept it up, where we're in America, we're dropping these things.
Do we have to worry about the toxins that are stored in these organs? No. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that people ask me all the time.
I'm not, because the liver has its own phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, which converts everything eventually to carbon dioxide and water. Yeah. So we're actually neutralizing it within the liver itself.
Gotcha. Okay. I've seen it in the store. I walked right past it. I'm just like, I don't know if I'm ready to do this. My mom used to give me bone marrow. She used to give me bone marrow when I broke my foot. She would just break the bone and we would suck on the bone marrow. That wasn't too bad.
Yeah. Bone marrow is yummy.
Yeah. Well, let's segue to the last part of this about nutrients, because I think that's what I'm studying. I study nutrients. Sure. So let's talk about, I know we need nutrients to produce the ATP, and that's like magnesium, iron, the B vitamins, niacin is huge. And then you just mentioned CoQ10. So in your opinion, besides the fact that our food chain is really not I was reading this book by Joe Robbins called, I can't remember the name of her book right now, but it was talking about like the way we should be growing our food. And she's saying because we're not actually growing it ourselves and we're not picking it freshly, that our food, by the time it gets to our house, onto our plate from when, and especially if it's from another country, it's been imported, it's lost a lot of its nutrient density by the time we get it. And then we have the problem with digestion. So a lot of people can't even eat a lot of food because their digestive processes are impaired. So what do you think is the main cause of these nutrient depletions? Well, can you just talk about the role nutrients have in the immune system? Just mainly the immune system.
Yeah, that would be the easiest. So first, and we've talked about this a little bit. First, it's from beginning to end. So first, it's chewing and saliva and having the secretory IgA, and then everything going down to the stomach. And we need to have, humans have one of the lowest pHs of any creature on the planet. The only real creature that I know of that has a pH lower than us is a vulture, a buzzard. And what are they eating? Carrion. They're eating dead, rotten roadkill. So they need to have that super low acid. So again, you go back to why through evolution or creation did we have a hydrochloric acid level in our stomach just above something that eats roadkill? Because we were designed to eat flesh and break, and we need the acid to break minerals down. Well, the world we live in under sympathetic dominant stress, fight, flight, keeping up with the Joneses and just stress, we inhibit that hydrochloric acid. So most people are already having a higher pH in their stomach, and just 1 point higher from a 3 to a 4 in the stomach, just that, and in the gut, can create small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Just that one higher level of pH, and in the intestine.
So you're saying stress raises the pH?
Stress does raise the pH. We lose our hydrochloric acid. And then also most people, if somebody eats a sugar, a starch, a grain, and they get gassy or bloaty or constipation, gurgly, bubbly stomach, it could be small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, dysbiosis, meaning bacteria in a place it shouldn't be. An overabundance of small intestinal bacteria should not be there. It should be in the large intestine. Usually could be an alkaline gut. So we defer back to the 50,000 years ago. If you could pick it, if you could kill it or ferment it, because we had no refrigeration. So within 48 hours in heat, fruits are fermenting, putrefying. We had an acidic gut because things were acidy, lactofermenting and putrefying. So we had more of an acidic gut. Well, now, because of the high starch processed food diet, we have a very alkaline gut. And that can't, so then people get the gassy, the bloaty, burping, dysbiosis, leaky gut, and constipation.
IBS, yeah.
So any kind of lactofermented food helps to reestablish that. Now, so if you have proper pH in your small intestine, proper pH in your stomach, you're able to liberate your zinc and magnesium and calcium from your food better. So now you're more efficiently getting the nutrients from your food, breaking the proteins down better. So that's really, really important. But even with that, there's certain things that I try to follow the truest definition of nutritional supplement. Supplement what you're not getting in nutrition. Personally, I don't care how good you eat. I still take magnesium for 26 years. I still take potassium for 26 years. No worries. I just don't think that we get enough magnesium and potassium in our diet. So I supplement that. The things that we need for our immune system right now, let's just kind of throw in the coronavirus. Zinc is the biggie. Zinc is huge, and I can't even get zinc. All my vendors everybody cleaned zinc out of the pure encapsulations, now foods. I mean, zinc is gone. So hopefully zinc will start coming back in. But zinc is an antioxidant for the red blood cell that we need for the virus. Zinc helps to protect the lungs in case somebody does go on in a they're ventilated and they have hyperoxygenation. They're 80 to 100% pure oxygen being thrown in. Zinc is the antioxidant for the lung tissue. Vitamin E is a antioxidant for the
Vitamin E.
tissue.
Love
And
vitamin
so,
E.
so zinc is huge. And then keeping up on our bees. I mean, I think that we need bees in such low amounts. If people eat a good diet and they're not under tons of stress and drinking alcohol, or they have so the people who need to supplement bees are people who drink alcohol and people who have high insulin or glucose. So diabetics need go through tons of Bs, B1, B6, B12.
Yeah,
And alcohol goes through the same B1, B6, and B12, and they need to supplement. But that's a whole nother.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of Americans.
Yeah, that's a lot of Americans. So right now I'm giving my patients Aspillardi to protect the large bowel. Colostrum is just fantastic. Colostrum has just shown hands down to blow flu vaccine out of the water as far as effectiveness at it's 3 times more effective at not getting the flu by taking colostrum than it is actually getting the flu vaccine, which last year in 2018, I think was only 27% or 37% effective. So colostrum's fantastic. NAC was used during N-acetylcysteine, which is an amino acid, was used during the H1N1 pandemic in 2008 and 9, and it's working now. So NAC is fantastic at building up glutathione levels in the body and protecting our body and help modulating the immune system. So really being out in nature, eating good, healthy, broad-based diet, trying to go back to fish, whole foods as much as possible. If you have any GI symptom and you're listening to this, I mean, get in touch with Mandy, who could help you, or because you got to acidify the gut, and there's proper ways of doing that. I think those things are really important. Let's see what else.
No, this is perfect. I think this is great. I think this is plenty for people to kind of digest.
Yeah, it's an hour.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, I think most people's attention span is like maximum 20 minutes at a time. So, but no, I think, if you guys missed some of this, go ahead and go back and watch it again. This was a really good talk. And I really appreciate your time. It's always great to hear from you. And Advanced Healing Center, if you have any specific issues with the, SIBO even, he's the guy for you. So it's a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for doing this today. And we'll definitely be in touch.
Thanks, Mandy. You take care. Thank you very much.
Take care. Okay. Well, thanks so much. Okay. Bye-bye.